Hi everyone, it's Nick here with Nick Tolman Music, and today we're going to be talking about how to hold your guitar. Alright, so you just got your first guitar, you're beginning to learn how to play, now you want to know how to properly hold your guitar. So we're going to go over some basics here that will hopefully get you kind of moving in the right direction. First off, if you're familiar with the guitar body, you notice that there's a really kind of a specific shape to it. This is a dreadnought style guitar body and kind of typically what you expect a guitar to look like. But one of the things that you notice is that there are these spots down here below and up above where the guitar curves inward. This one down here on the bottom is going to be where we put one of our legs. Now, the kind of modern approach to holding a guitar is to rest that on your right leg. Now, if you're a classical guitarist, this is definitely different. Okay, so in the classical guitar world, that's going to be on the left leg with your left foot elevated, usually by placing your foot on a little footstool. We're not going to talk about that too much today. There are some benefits to that can come up, especially if you're experiencing pain in your left hand because of strain, but we'll talk about that a little bit further on. For now, we're going to say all you got to do is take that guitar, rest it right there on your right leg. Now, let's talk about the right arm really quick. I generally encourage students to rest their right here, this part of the body, the kind of the largest hump here on the side of the guitar. You're going to rest your forearm relatively close to your elbow. Exactly where you're going to rest kind of depends on the length of your arm. But the idea is that you want your hand to line up in the middle of the strings here, giving you the ability to play. This resting of the arm right here really is an important pivot in your right arm motion, because there's going to be times when you're using that whole arm to stroke as you pick the guitar, okay? Like I said before, exactly where you rest is going to depend on the length of your arm. If you have shorter arms, that might almost completely be at your elbow, or if you have longer arms, it might be more toward the middle of your forearm. That's okay. The idea is just that you're going to have that kind of pivot point and that spot for your right hand to be able to play. Alright, so we're still focusing on the right arm. Another concept that is really important in the guitar is we want to avoid tension always. That being said, we're always trying to make sure that this arm and hand is relatively straight and flat. We don't generally ever want a lot of tension like this. Now, there's going to be a little bit more of that if I'm finger picking, because my hands are going to kind of be in this scenario. But if you ever catch yourself in a situation where you're really cranking your wrist down, you don't want that. You just want your arm and hand and wrist to all be generally straight and generally relaxed, okay? And you should be good to go. Right arm, boom, pretty easy. As you set your right arm here, it's also important to note where you want to be picking, and that may change over time depending on what you're doing, but there's a different tone if you were picking the guitar down here near the bridge versus up closer to the neck. Right? And you'll notice that my arm resting position kind of changes depending on what I'm doing with that. That's okay. You can move as needed. There's nothing wrong with that. Alright. Okay, so let's talk about the left hand really quick, because this is a very important part of how to hold the guitar. And there's a lot of mistakes that tend to take place with the left hand. Same concept as with the right hand. We are trying as much as we can with the left hand to create an atmosphere where we are not overstraining our wrist. This causes a lot of problems in guitar playing. Now, you may need to experiment with a few different things, but one of the really common issues that I see with new guitarists is this right here, just like a lot of tension in that wrist. Okay, they're trying to stretch with their fourth finger or whatever they're trying to do. They're getting a lot of tension here. Our goal is to not do that. So as I play, you'll notice my wrist is staying relatively straight, as opposed to something like this. I can't even hardly do it because it hurts, okay? That's one of the first signs if someone is telling me they're experiencing pain in their left hand. Watch out for that. So what's causing it, okay? So there's a couple things. First off, if the neck of your guitar is too low down here, it's going to force you, it's just natural physiology. If your neck is super low, I'm going to have to bend my wrist to be able to play on the neck, right? By raising that, instantly my wrist is straighter and better suited to play the instrument. So keep that in mind. You'll notice my neck is at a slightly upward direction as I play. That's what we want, okay? Now, if you're still experiencing issues with that, sometimes I've encouraged students that are having issues with this that maybe switching to more of a classical guitar approach will provide a better opportunity for a more neutral wrist position. If you're experiencing a lot of pain or having struggles being able to reach, especially with the fourth finger, this might be something to experiment with. You know, you'll notice in this approach I'm resting the guitar on the left leg with it significantly more upward. My left foot is elevated using, in most cases, right now I'm just resting it on my other foot, but in most cases you would use like a guitar, like a footstool. All right, so that's that. Now, the right hand here, general setup is our fingers are going to be over the frets, but the back of the neck is actually really important. So I'll let you take a look here at what my thumb looks like. But this is generally where my thumb is resting. So it's on the back of the neck in this manner. Now, there are times when it might move more upward or even further back along this way, but we don't want to get into a habit where the guitar is always resting right here. I see that very commonly in new students, and what that does is that closes off your ability to stretch your fingers this way. It really places a lot of strain. And so if you're trying to reach with your, especially with your fourth finger, you're trying to do some chords that are more stretched out, you're going to have a harder time when it's like this, okay? Resting your thumb here gives the ability, it's much easier for me to stretch and place my fingers where they need to go. That being said, there are exceptions to every rule. There may be times when your thumb needs to come up and be more around. Maybe you're, playing a D and you want to get that F sharp in the bass there. There may be times that you need to do that, but as a norm, you want that thumb to be back behind the neck. All right, so those are the basics of how to hold the guitar. Let's talk really quickly about how to hold the pick. So now I'd like to talk a little bit about how to hold the guitar pick. You may not need this information if you're playing all finger style playing, or maybe you're playing classical style guitar or whatever. You can ignore this side of it, but holding the pick is an important part to most guitar players. The thing I like to do with my students is to start out by making a very light fist. Okay, so I'm not like clenching like I'm going to punch someone. I'm just like close my hands and thumb like that. Just close. Okay. Now, the idea is that the pick is kind of an extension of the side of your thumb, okay? So from this point, I'm coming it from the bottom, I'm just going to kind of stick that pick in between the thumb and the first finger. Now you'll notice that the pick is kind of in between the first two knuckles of the finger, okay? Now, this is just kind of giving you an idea of where it sits. I will generally push it up a little bit farther, so there's only about that much sticking out from the bottom, okay? So stick it in there, there's our little fist. Now from here, these fingers can just relax, okay? They don't need to stay fisted up. In fact, it's probably better that they don't stay fisted up. because at some point you might need those fingers to play as well. If you're looking at doing some chicken picking, playing some country lead playing, or even not, there are other scenarios as well where you might need to pick with those fingers in addition to picking with your pick. Call that hybrid picking. All right, so let's talk for a second about actually picking the guitar. So you've learned how to hold it, and now we're trying to apply that. We talked about this pivot point up here on the arm. If I'm strumming a chord, that point is going to be really important, right? I'm just holding that pick, like I said, and I'm just picking downwards, upwards, downwards, upwards with that light motion. Now my hand does have some fluidity to it, almost like you're painting with a paintbrush, right? It's not like rigid. It's got a little bit, right? Okay. Now, if you're picking individual strings, that motion might be a lot more controlled just with the wrists and not so much with the full arm. Right? Just picking down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. Experiment with that a little bit. A lot of people think that you have to pick with your pick very flat, like boom, coming with the pick totally parallel to the string. But that's not exactly the case. I tend to pick more with the pick slightly at an angle. It's a more neutral tone. It's a different tone to pick totally flat versus, especially in the upper strings. Yeah, so that second tone is darker. That's going to be from a slightly more angled pick angle. A lot of this is just going to be experimentation. All right, so that's the basics of holding the guitar, holding the picks, just some basic picking motions. I hope you found this information useful. If you have questions, please leave them in the comments below. As always, please subscribe. If you enjoyed this content, feel free to check out my Patreon page and consider supporting Nick Tolan Music in that way. Thank you.